All right, welcome back to Second Breakfast. We're here talking about Diablo IV again. This is our ongoing coverage of the greatest horror fantasy work of art that's going to come out this year. Today we're talking about Act 3. Of course, I have Maggie and Tristan with me, and we're changing it up a little this time. Maggie's going to do the big story recap. Would everyone like to say hello?
Hello, I'm very excited to do the big story recap. I feel like I've been given a real responsibility.
Hey, and I'm very excited as well, really prepared to be underwhelmed. So
What a way to kick us off.
Matt, honestly, with your Witcher stuff, I think you do a great job whenever you did do a few of the recaps.
Yeah, I haven't done those in a long time. I should clarify, I did not write this recap.
Who did?
I'm reading Cam's
Outsourced.
recap. Cam did it, but I'm going to read it so I can feel involved. Okay, should we jump in?
On that happy note.
Good open.
This is just my own. I'm sorry. Okay. We're all in a weird mood today.
Every time
I just want to share that.
You did this on the last episode too. It's just like
What?
lonely Maggie in the middle of a stage and a spotlight flares up.
Guys.
Please clap.
That's the exact feeling I have at all times. It's lessened when it's just you and me. It's really when, this guy is here.
Uh-oh.
This fella.
This fella over here.
All right, what you got?
Okay, so Diablo 4, Act 3. What?
It sounded like a book report.
Listen,
The
you gave
wrinkling
me
of the
homework,
page.
and I'm
Diablo
presenting the homework.
She did prepare a PowerPoint, and then we were just going to be reading from
The
slides.
Prezi.
Man, Prezi. Okay, don't get me started on Prezi. Okay, Diablo 4, Act 3. So
Diablo 3 Act 5.
Yeah, listen, Diablo 4 Act 3. In this act, we return back to Lorath, who is voiced by Ralph Ineson, right? So our famous, he's like a hermit in this, right? What is he?
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
he's
that.
like a hermit. He returns to center stage, okay? And so we meet up with him in Ked Bardu, which is in the uncharted, like western part of the map that we haven't been to before. It's like this really exciting windswept desert. It's got like a Middle East feel. It's pretty fun. It's it's the Sand Act, like we talked about.
It's Dune.
It's Dune. Yeah, exactly. But I think like if you compare it to like Diablo 3 Act 2, which is the more sandy act, this one I think is way more interesting
Because Timothy Chalamet's in it.
that'll usually do it. Yeah. And so here we are tracking clues that will lead us to Lorath's evil former scholar Elias. And so we get to this monastery, right? And it's filled with these piles of dead scholars. And so we learn that Elias had this ability to summon a lesser evil, which is not good. And so we end up battling this mass of like vengeful spirits, and this boss fight is called the Eidolon of Orbe. And so then we go through this abandoned house, this house that belongs to a guy named Genbar, and we end up finding demonic scrolls and carvings and bloody Lilith statues, and it's pretty gross and fun. And then we have this boss fight against Genbar, who in fact was the disciple of Elias. Is that the one that almost killed us, or was that later?
No, we'll get there.
Okay. And so then we move on and we pursue this clue, which was a medallion inside a demon's stomach. Very fun. And we get to this cannibal-infested city of Gulran. We sneak into the city and we search through this prison, and we eventually discover a secret tunnel into a palace where we can find Elias, who plans to summon Andariel, who is a lesser evil demon who feeds off of mental and emotional torment. It's very fun. And then we go over to the Temple of Primes in Mount Sivo to disrupt a ritual where Elias will summon Andariel. And to enter the mountain, we have to hunt down the shrines to Mephisto, Baal, and Diablo, who are these like prime evils. It's very, very cool. We have to receive their blessings, right? And so we discover that the bloodied wolf from one of the previous acts was really Mephisto all along, which is very fun, who also turns out hates Lilith. And so then we go into the Temple of the Primes, and we reach Elias after the ritual has already begun, and we're thrown into this boss fight with Brawl, the Tyrant King. That's the one that nearly destroyed us. Do you remember that one, Tristan?
I hated that guy.
Yes. And that guy was so for the rogue, it was a little easier because that combo that I talked about last time where you've got that skill where it enables you to have unlimited resources. And I can just pump in my most powerful skill into him over and over again. When that happens, that made the fight way easier for me.
Oh.
He was very strong. He had a lot of health, but I got this amulet that pops a shield that allows me to be invulnerable for like 5 or 6 seconds. So what I would do is I would wait for that to go off, and then I would use my ult, which basically creates like a clone of myself that does the same moves that I'm doing just at 60% damage. So basically, you've got 160% of your damage, and then I would, proc my the ability where it's unlimited, and so I just kept pumping it into him, and he went down pretty quick.
Wow.
Did you kite him around the table at the top of the map?
I didn't have to.
Wow. Okay.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
because you got to keep in mind, Rogue is like hypermobile, right? So
Right,
using the
right.
dash skill, you can get away pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So it wasn't the same kind of strategy.
Okay.
My golem came in handy here. We would like kite him around the table and then just kind of hide while my golem just kind of ate at him. So after that terrible boss fight, we meet a woman named Tysa who was forced into the Andariel summoning ritual. And she has somehow been bonded to the demon. And so she tells us that Elias is probably in his desert palace in Kyrgyzstan. And so to get there, we have to go through this like desert storm where we're like going through the sand, and we're guided by a guy named Mephisto. And so he guides us through with this delightful healing camel who helps heal you as you go along. And we finally reach the gardens of Elias's palace, and we learn that he has this sightless eye, which lets him see like anywhere. And so we have like half a dozen boss fights with Elias throughout the palace, and each time he's got like more and more health and demons and many bosses and stuff. But after that, once you finally destroy him, or once you win the boss fight, I suppose, he escapes with Lorath, who steals the sightless eye. And so then we return to Mashif, who turns out is bleeding out. Oops. And then we regroup with Lorath and Tysa to plot the next steps, which involves weaponizing the sightless eye. And that's where the act ends.
I think on sort of a top line level, I enjoyed this maybe as much as the other two, even though it felt so different. Like this
Yeah.
act felt a lot shorter to me. It felt a lot more open world. There was like a dense main story that we played straight through. Instead of breaking it up with side content, we barreled through this one, but it felt much blunter. Where the first act felt very linear, very on rails, very narrative, this act felt very loose and scattered in a way that was fun but very different from Act 1.
Yeah.
And it made me appreciate sort of the Goldilocks that we got in Act 2.
I was going to say, I liked this act, but it made me like Act 2 even more, especially because when we recorded for Act 2, you and I, Cam, had already started Act 3. And so as we were talking about Act 2, I was like, wow, Act 2 was really good. I don't know if you felt that same way, Tristan.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way the story is set up, right? You really get the sense in this act of getting there just a little too late, like after something's already happened. And so I feel like what you're talking about when you say it felt loose is that when you get there, it feels like there's kind of stuff going on. I mean, it really does not feel like the story that is driving the game is really on everybody's mind, right? In the town and in the places that you're in and around, which is weird because the whole thing is like Lilith has incited all of these people to go nuts and give into their most base instincts. I guess I just would have expected to see a little bit more pandemonium. And I guess we got that in the prison because they kind of took over or whatever. You know, they're cannibals inside the prison, I guess. But I think that could have been better illustrated instead of just told to us, and then we end up in there.
Did you get a chance to play a lot of the side content for this act, Tristan?
No, I didn't. And I was telling you guys earlier, the last couple of days, I've just sort of barreled through. Spoiler alert, I have finished the story. I didn't mean to do that, but I just don't have that much time to play. So when I do, I need to like get through it, and then ultimately endgame, I'm gonna do all of the side quests. I'm gonna do all of the the leveling and things like that, and the different builds and different seasonal play. But for now, I just wanted to get through it because I had some time to actually sit back and play.
Because we've been playing it in such a strange, disordered way too.
A little bit,
we tried to split it up a lot with Act 2 and balance it out between main stuff and side stuff. But with this one, we just went straight through the main quest, and then we didn't play for like a week.
Yeah.
And then we played a little bit on like a Friday and spent a lot of Saturday playing. And that was like a number of hours of just the side content.
I was going to say, I feel like in Act 3, we kind of barreled through the main quests, and then we're like, oh yeah, side quests. So we went back and like did all of those. So it was kind of strange.
Doing them all as the main course, I think it exposed this act as being a little thin compared to Act 2. Like the thing I love the thing you said about Lilith and that battle not being central on everyone's mind, because all of these side quests were about thieves and cannibals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they all, I mean, unfortunately, they all felt like side content in a game.
Uh-huh.
It
Yeah.
felt kind of fetch questy or just rote. Your eyes kind of roll back, and like it became a podcast game a little.
Yeah.
It just
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
felt like it was just kind of like getting us along to the next important story beat. It didn't feel like filler. That's too harsh, but it just felt like just getting us from point A to point B.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe it's the risk that you run of doing it like we did it. When you barrel
Mm.
through and just do all of the story beats and don't do any of the side quests at the same time, maybe
Mm.
you sort of lose a little bit of the world building. Sort of
Mhm.
like, we both happen to do the goose or the inn quest. What was it?
The Fat Goose
Fat
Inn.
goose. Yeah. We both happened to do that quest, and that one was sort of just in the middle of nowhere. So it's kind of funny that we both ended up doing that one. I would have felt like I was robbed of something had I not done it. So maybe we just didn't hit that equivalent quest in this line. There's another one in Act 1, I believe, where you go around and you help this exorcist lady exorcise this demon.
We did that.
Yes.
It
And
was so cool.
you help her out like 3 or 4 times, and that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. You really feel like you're having like an impact. And so, there are ones like that which are sort of fit the middle ground between a fetch quest and the main quest, right? It's sort of
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
a real side story. And so maybe once you get to a certain point, because there's a lot of different forms of content going on in Diablo 4, right? You've got the grind of wanting to get equipment, the build of making your class and abilities work together the way that you want them to, which goes hand in hand with the build and items that you're using. But then on the other hand, you've got the story and the experience and the world building that all kind of happen. They don't necessarily have to work together.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And in fact, it's easier to build and or amass equipment when you're not necessarily following the story. But when you're following the story, you also level up faster and you tend to get access to better equipment faster because those
Mm.
world bosses and those act bosses tend to have better drops. So,
Yes.
and the further you get along in an act, the better equipment tends to drop. So, you kind of have an incentive to do that if you are trying to improve your character as much as you can, as quick as you can. So it sort of disincentivizes you if you're really getting into it and the grind, it disincentivizes you from going through all the side story content because there's more of a payoff for just barreling through the story at large so that you
Mm.
can get to the end game, which has access to better items. You have to beat the game in order to access the third and higher world tiers, and higher world
Mhm.
tiers give you better drops.
Right.
Mm.
And this
Yeah.
whole game, I mean, Diablo invented the looter genre, right? More or
Mhm.
less. The whole game is essentially about getting better equipment, so you're stronger, so you really get to live that power trip fantasy, right? You've got
Mm.
just two different things with entertainment value that are separate that are going on at the same time. And
Right.
I think that people who are playing Diablo tend to lean more heavily the leveling aspect than the story aspect.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's complicated by the fact that like our biggest complaint so far has been it's scaled, right? And so there's an even bigger incentive to chase down good loot and to level up and to like build out the best character you can. And so you're even more incentivized to sort of ignore the fun like story world building side quest stuff because you're like I'm not feeling powerful. I want to level up. I want to get the good equipment. And so I think that makes those two things not coexist very well, which is a little frustrating, I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to Tristan when you and I used to play Borderlands, because that's a looter
Yeah.
that is very much born of Diablo, but switched to be a shooter.
Hmm.
I mean, that's why I like Destiny. It's the
Right.
same
Right.
thing. It's ripping off the same source material. But
100%.
I remember when I went back to it, I was surprised by how tough the game was. I feel like modern shooters have gotten much fluffier, and I was surprised at how
Uh-huh.
hard that normal gameplay is. But I had a couple weapons on each class that broke the whole build and broke like the game. And
Yep.
then when that one item was so good, I could build that entire class around like this one pistol that had infinite ammo and it fired rockets and all sorts of
Right.
stuff. I love the power fantasy I get of Diablo.
Mhm.
And not only have I not felt that in Diablo 4, I haven't really encountered any of those items that have totally changed my build and challenged my
Yeah.
You know
class.
what I think's going on there? I think the developers are building in longevity. They are trying to make sure that the players keep coming back. They don't want to waste. It's a delicate balance, and I feel for them in this instance because gamers have become so much more ravenous. The expectations are so much higher on any game, much less a AAA title. You know, they've stated is going to be live service. I think what they're trying to do right now is prevent power creep too early, because if it's anything like Diablo 3, there's going to be like 20 or 30 seasons. And so you can't just be uber powerful from the jump, or else you're going to be like, all right, how can it get better than this? You know, what is my incentive to keep playing? And that's the whole heart behind the looter genre anyway, is that you're going to keep going, you'll get better and better items, and you'll improve as you go. But they want people to keep coming back. Unfortunately, they are left to follow the model that PUBG and Fortnite have laid forth as something that can be successful, in that people keep coming back to play that gameplay loop over and over and over again. They're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, because I don't think that's necessarily what people come to Diablo for. But that's unfortunately the reality that we're living in right now, and I think that's why that's probably the common complaint that I've seen online, which is very toxic. You don't really need to go read the stuff on Reddit, because it'll leave you with the wrong impression of the game. But I think one of the valid points there is that people, to some extent, have lost a little bit of interest. Now, that's probably on them too for burnout, because the game's been out for less than a month. They've probably got 200 hours on the game, which is its own problem. But the issue is, I think that the drop rate of really, really, really good items is super, super low, in part because you don't really get access to that stuff until you reach third, fourth, and plus world tiers, because that's where those better drops are actually going to occur.
Yeah, I feel like we need to like once we finish all of this, we should like once we get into the end game, we have time to play around in like World Tier 3, see how we feel then. And I wonder if I think you're probably right, Tristan. I think it'll just work better for us once we get there.
Maybe. I
Mhm.
mean, I feel like I've played a lot of looters since I played this first Diablo or Borderlands with you, Tristan. And I agree that looters in the decade since then, or decade plus, I guess, at this point, have always been defined by their end game. But every signal I'm getting from Blizzard in the way they've crafted Diablo 4, the thing that has really captured my imagination is their intense focus on story and the journey up until endgame. So I feel like I don't want to hold my breath for the experience to be good there, because they're putting so much effort into the story, the characters, the cinematics, the story expansions that they're planning for full expansions, and the seasons that are going to presumably go on indefinitely. They're putting so much effort into the story that it almost feels at odds with the player's focus on endgame. And I don't know what happens when those
Yeah.
interests clash.
I agree with you 100%. It's kind of difficult because the fan base expects this crazy built out end game early. That's unfair, because that didn't exist in Diablo 3 for at least a few years, but they expect it because Diablo 3 was so relatively recent in time, people were still playing it. So they're used to that, and they expect that like really quickly from Diablo 4. I think that's tough, because what the devs are giving us about, oh, here we've got all this stuff that's going to happen in game, we're heavily focused on end game. It makes the campaign, for as much as they've had a focus on story, it makes the campaign feel like a bit of an afterthought, because you're just trying to get through it so that you can access that end game content, which is supposedly the content that's going to keep you coming back. It's almost like the main story is something you have to check off first. It's like a 30-hour box to check in order to get to the stuff that everyone wants to ultimately partake in and really live out that power fantasy. They don't give it to you in the main story. They're straddling this line and trying to do both things at once. And I think necessarily a little bit of a focus on one takes away from the other.
Yeah, that is really frustrating, especially because I'm so like excited by this is a really good story, especially compared to like Diablo 3. And so I like want to be really invested in the story and the world. Also, that's just my personal preference is that element of a game like this. But I feel like it keeps almost incentivizing me to not do that. And I'm finding that like I found in Act 3, the story also wasn't quite as great as the rest of the game has been so far. And I just kind of felt like I was grinding through it, especially what like Act 3 was cool. Like I liked the environment and stuff, but I also, we talked about this in our Diablo 3 episode. It got kind of samey. It got a little monotonous and I got kind of tired of it. And I just wanted like, okay, can we get through the thieves and cannibals?
And it's because it was the sand level.
Exactly. Right. And so it's just like, can we be done? So I'm hopeful that the story is better in Act 4. I like totally redid my build on my character and I haven't played it yet. So I'm hopeful that I'll come into Act 4 a new woman and just like have a better time. Because I'm still loving the game. We're like really getting deep into it. It's just there are a lot of frustrations and I'm hoping those will kind of resolve themselves.
Not only was this a more static location for this act, but something we tried to preview before, there was an incredible prominence and frequency of boss fights here, which I thought were fun. Like the challenge was intense. All of those Elias fights through that chapel, getting worse and worse each time you go, getting more of those little notches on the health bar. Those were interesting. And when we talked last time about the ghost enemies and the phantoms not making sense or being relevant in the world, like why am I swinging a sword at a ghost? How is a ghost firing arrows at me? It's barely fun.
Why is the sword hitting it?
Right, like I've never enjoyed a repetitive boss fight 6 times so much, but it's because they contextualized it in the story. And Elias was fine. All the other fights were fine, but this one that we have to talk about is Brawl, which was the fight of our lives. I thought that was a ridiculous difficulty spike for our classes because we were kiting him. We were trying everything. And the way the barbarian works is I run into combat, die, Maggie brings me back, and then I do bleed damage for 10 minutes trying not to die again.
Yeah, and I'm just like staying in the corner like pew, pew, pew.
It's why, I mean, I've had to like kind of ground up my build that I was working towards because I like to cause as much damage as possible and run around in the action. And you can't do that with this class, even though it's the preeminent melee class in all of ARPGs. What you have to do is have like 1 or 2 attacks equipped, and everything else has to be shouts and buffs for mana. And if you can get one piece of gear that'll give you that bubble shield that'll protect you, maybe you'll stand a chance. But I mean, it's getting tough to be a barbarian as we get deeper into the difficulty spike, as we get deeper into the new boss fight interest that we're having. We're doing our best to coordinate our builds here, but at some point, this is not exactly what I wanted from Diablo, and I'm enjoying it like I enjoyed Elden Ring. And I didn't expect that shift in perspective.
So it's more challenging than you had expected it to be.
Yes, and this is
not in a fun way.
Like, Tristan, you and I will do an Elden Ring episode eventually.
Yes.
And I think as much as I've learned about fantasy from Game of Thrones or Harry Potter or Tolkien or The Witcher, I really learned something from Elden Ring because it kicked my ass constantly. And it gave me this perspective on the fantasy genre of I would die immediately. And so would you, and all of us would. And when I go,
it bullied you into that understanding.
Yeah, and when we went back to Diablo 3 to record that retrospective, I was a god. I was great. I mean, I was tearing through rooms and stuff. And then we get to Diablo 4, and I'm a dainty little flower. It's just,
humbling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
It is,
but it's
again,
tough.
I think you have to have those like great moments of reward where you get the really good loot or you get a really great power, like a really great new skill unlocked. And like I just haven't really felt that so far, and we're like halfway through the game. So I don't mind a game being challenging, but you have to reward your player for it. And it seems like we're not going to be rewarded until we beat the game, which I don't love.
My
Mhm.
sorcerer, who I've talked about as this fire mage who was a lot more powerful, I was blazing through stuff.
Her name is Margaret.
Yeah, my sorcerer, as I hit Act 3, shit the bed.
Really?
It's gone. I had to rebuild that character from a build I found online because I went into the stronghold full of vampires and I just got roasted.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I totally rebuilt into like an electricity sorcerer, and it melted the boss I was fighting. I was like, this feels like Diablo.
It's pretty insane. That's one of the issues right now, is that it doesn't feel like every single skill is viable, and that's easy enough to change. They can change damage and, balance them better and stuff, but
Mm.
if I didn't have that one affix on my twisting blades ability, I wouldn't have been able to play this game solo. And if I didn't have the shield amulet, right, which I carried that for like since it's level 20 or 25,
Mm.
and that like got me through most of the game because it's so useful, right? You can immunity is immunity no matter what level you are, and
Yeah.
6 seconds of it in a game like this is
Yeah.
nuts. Had I not had those, I wouldn't have been able to do it as well, and I wouldn't have had as good of a time, because the rogue is a very mechanically intensive class. A lot of people on PC don't like it because they have to push so many buttons all the time at the same time. It's not just one over and over again. You got to be very active with it,
Right.
but it really does lend itself to controller a lot better.
Mm.
So that's been fun, but if I didn't have the items that I'd picked up, I would not have had as good of a time.
Mm.
I almost feel guilty, like when I hear you tell these stories about the rogue, because I was getting annihilated as my sorcerer a few days ago, trying to blow through this dungeon. It was one of those, it's all the goat men and it's icy. It was one of those.
Yeah.
I was trying to get an
Yeah.
aspect that mattered, and I was right towards the end, and it was like the 4th time I just got lit up by the boss at the very end of the dungeon, and it was one of those where you have to talk to someone to summon the boss back. So
Yeah.
I was in this little purgatory of trying to cool down and see what else I could do differently. And Maggie walked in and she was like, "Oh, do you want help?" And she pressed 2 buttons, joined my game, and we obliterated the
Yeah.
boss.
Yeah, so I just like jumped in, even though I don't play with your sorcerer ever. I was like, I'll just help you. I'll just jump right in, and it was great.
Like, have you had moments as a solo player, Tristan, where you wish you could like pull that ripcord and have a buddy join?
When I was fighting I talked about it like in the first or second episode that we did, that spider boss, Sarat.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
That would have been because I died to that. That is the most times I died in this game. I don't think after I beat that, I don't think I died a single time.
I've died so many times.
After the spider, I didn't die because it forced me to be so intentional about my build that once I laid like a solid foundation of skills and different attributes, it made me grow up as the character. It did the Elden Ring thing where it bullied me into getting good.
Uh-huh.
And so once I found that build that worked, because I was being very intentional about being a demon hunter light,
Yes.
right? Where I was playing a ranged build. It was during that fight that I quickly switched to melee because I realized just how much more viable it was. And I stuck with that for the rest of the game, and I did not have a single issue.
Well, that's good to know, because I really want to play Rogue solo once we finish the campaign this first time. So I will definitely lean more that way.
It is a tough early game.
Got it.
Because it didn't really get awesome until I got the aspect where the blades dance around me.
Yeah.
And you really need all of your skills to be viable.
Gotcha.
You're gonna pop everything with each encounter that you do until you have leveled up enough to where you've gotten all of your skills that you like or that work, plus all of their extra attributes and stuff. It's hard to really feel a power fantasy. But by the end of the game, I was melting.
Oh, okay. Well, that's encouraging.
It was pretty cool to see it all come together.
Okay. Well, that's encouraging.
Without spoiling anything, I know you've played through the whole campaign at this point, Tristan. How do you feel about the fact that the ranged half of the class never became viable?
I don't know that it never became viable.
Okay.
I just never went back and tried to fix it because I did not care to respec my entire character
Uh-huh.
again.
That's fair.
Especially because, like I said, there are certain builds that simply don't work. So there's the chance that I made my own build again, and it wasn't as effective, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mhm.
So the only reason I got better after the spider boss is because I was forced to.
Right.
I didn't run into anything after that was challenging enough for me to go, oh crap, I need to redo this.
Around this time of Act 3, do you know how much of your build, how many pieces of gear that you were wearing were legendaries? Because I feel like it's almost all of them for me now.
Me too.
I think it was either all or most
And
by that
Yeah.
time.
I don't know what the drop rate seems a lot lower for legendaries.
Yes.
I find that I'm getting all of my best gear from spending the murmuring obols.
Those like little like gambling moments you do where you like pay the
Yes.
obols and you might get something cool. Yeah, I've gotten like 5 legendary items from doing that.
And we were talking about the way that you can incentivize players before. I like that they're incentivizing events.
Yes, absolutely.
Me too.
Because I love that moment of help. I have something positive here. If we want to,
Let's end on a
we
positive.
want to end on a positive,
That
unless
sounds
anyone
good.
else has something.
Real quickly on a story beat note, I want to preface this by saying I've really have enjoyed, and I enjoyed the game through the end. My experience with it was not bad. These were all like nitpicky things, and I think it's okay to talk about them because I'm invested in the game enough to care about these
Yes.
things. I have an issue with Elias.
Mm.
Okay.
Elias is not a compelling villain. And I don't know how to express that other than to say that you've seen him. Is there a single reason why I should give a shit about Elias?
Yeah.
Because all he did was summon Lilith,
Yeah.
and he's got this thing where he was a good guy or whatever,
Mhm.
but now he's turned evil.
Yeah, again, it's like that means to an end thing. Like he's just some random dude who follows Lilith, but she has a million of those people, and our big bad is Lilith. I think that's a good point. I mean, I didn't like dislike being around Elias, but like I'm not going to remember him when we move on to somebody else, you know?
Maybe. I mean, Tristan, you and I think we kind of bonded over this in the Act 2 discussion. The Donan and urine connection I found very compelling. I think the father and son hook always gets me. It's why
Yeah.
Top Gun Maverick was such a good movie. And I think I immediately connected with Elias through Lorath. And I'm only
Mhm.
interested in him as far as he is connected to Lorath and he's hurting him as almost this rogue son who's turned to the dark side. So I'm only really watching the story from that angle. And from that angle, I'm still kind of interested.
Well, yeah. I mean, just at that point in time, I mean, they talk about, first of all, he's just got like, it's just a normal name, Elias. I mean, like that is not like instilling fear
Uh-huh.
into me, right? It's not like Nargoth, like it's just
A
just
dude.
it's just
like
there.
Dune.
I was gonna
Paul.
say it's like Paul being the main character of
yeah.
Dune. Paul.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's just hard. It's hard to find him compelling. Lilith is incredibly compelling.
Oh yeah.
The one redeeming quality about both of them, not that it's a good quality in Lilith, it's a redeeming quality in Elias, is that their motivations could be justified. Because the story that we're getting from them is that they're trying to fight hell so they don't destroy Sanctuary.
Mhm.
So Sanctuary is like the world that you're in, which was created by Lilith and Inarius, because that's what they did. They made this plane and they made humanity. So like you kind of understand her motivation. If it's true, then she wants to protect what she made,
Mhm.
which is a very like human and justifiable goal.
Totally.
And then if you look at it on the flip side, Elias, and this is, I don't think the story does a very good job of exploring this. If she's right, and that's what she's doing, then what she and Elias have done and what Elias did in bringing her back was to mount what seems to be the only active defense against mounting armies in hell. And it's like, did we literally in the third game, that is what we did. We fought heaven and hell.
True.
To prevent like a total collapse or whatever onto Sanctuary.
Interesting.
And now we've decided that the person who has, like, yes, he's using a demon to do it, to mount a defense. We've decided that that's the wrong approach this
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We almost have a bias Like our perspective in the story, it felt so much more objective in D3 because we had the mentor figure and the big scary
Right.
demon, and we were just on, I mean, literally with what's his name? We were on the side of the angels, you know? And
Mhm.
this time I feel like it's more about who you know and from what angle you're
Yes.
viewing the world, because most of the people Lilith appeals to are stuck in horrific, miserable lives.
Yeah.
And I can't argue with what she's selling them. I like that there's a messiness, a conflict, and sort of a lack of clarity here. I think that maybe makes for more compelling or debatable storytelling.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like the story presents it as so cut and dry, like they're in the wrong.
Yeah. Mhm.
And there was so much potential there to delve into it more from the perspective of your own character.
Mhm.
Because generally when your character's prompted with something, they and Lorith are immediately opposed to whatever is said
Right.
by
Yeah.
Elias and or Lilith. Now, understandable, I guess, from our character
Uh-huh.
because they're introduced to Lilith's influence by being drugged and like almost killed.
Right. Yes. Uh-huh.
But outside of that one instance, up till Act 3, other than the demons that you fight, which I
Mhm.
guess are somehow maybe related to Lilith being there.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's really not a lot of instances where you can say, oh, Lilith's influence is ravaging the land.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe because I didn't do a lot of the side quests, I'm missing that story beat.
I think I get your point now. The world is more nuanced, but the characters are more binary
Yes.
in their perspectives. And
Yeah.
every act seems to have a bunch of scattered side quests that aren't terribly important, and then maybe one quest chain. In the second act, it was that Under the Fat Goose Inn that we all imprinted on. In Act 3, it's this thing about the cannibals where you get together with some people and it ends in this kind of ground war against some of them, where they invade this cave and all of these hordes and you clear out all the cannibals. It didn't really flesh out my understanding of the act.
No, it didn't either. It was like it was an interesting side plot, but it didn't do much to the rest of the
It
world.
didn't complicate it. Like
No,
if we'd
not at
ever seen
all.
one of our main characters consider Lilith's proposition,
Maybe they are sort of entertaining this position because in pretty much every act, you also encounter somebody who maybe used to be quote unquote good that is now under the influence of Lilith and
Oh,
is
that's
doing
true.
something that she's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could have been explored like, why are these people who used to be heroes, especially like looking at Donan, the two folks that he worked with back then, they sort of defect to helping Lilith. And it doesn't seem like they had a great character change either when we meet them. So people who were good could have had a difference of opinion and did have a difference of opinion and ended up agreeing with her, but we're never really encouraged to explore why that might be or the nuances of the character decisions that led them to that. Instead, we just fight them and kill them and don't analyze it.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you said earlier, Tristan. It's we come to things after they've already happened and we just hear about it. Rather, it's showing and not telling, or it's telling
Yeah.
and not showing. We don't get to see these things happen and explore that nuance. It's just, oh yeah, they are already under Lilith's influence, which is like
right,
cool, but
right.
like I would like to explore that a bit more. I don't mind where we land in the chronology of the story, but I still want to explore it a bit more when they're trying to create this really nuanced world, but our characters are thinking, as you said, Cam, in this really binary way.
Like I wish we didn't meet Elias as a convert.
Uh-huh.
If we'd seen
Uh-huh.
some of that journey, if we'd seen
If we'd seen him convert,
right,
that would
or
be cool.
or even his connection with Lorath, who we
Mhm.
do seem to trust. He's kind of messy and broken in his own right, but we trust him as sort of the moral arbiter leading us through this story.
Mhm.
If he had really locked in with Elias and then we'd seen that like corruption and fall, maybe that would have fleshed it out more.
Right, something like that.
You're
yeah.
selling me on this.
You
Maybe
are.
it's shit.
Yeah.
This game
so
sucks.
and like I don't mean to say it like that. It's just
No, I
it-
know.
It's
Yeah.
it's just frustrating because it's all there, right? They have all
Yeah.
of the raw pieces. And again, I don't know if it's because playing it for the story is at odds with playing it for maximizing your build potential,
Mhm.
and they are. Those are at odds. Maybe it's because of that that the nuances of the story get a little bit less attention. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess all of that stuff is there if you look for it. I know that these games and Blizzard in general, dating back to when they first started making games, have been notorious for basically writing books that go along with the games that you have
Right.
to read in order to really understand everything that's going on.
I hate that.
Blizzard put out a set of 4 videos that go into like the history of Diablo, and it's
Mm.
all voiced by Ralph Ineson in
Oh.
character as Lorath. And it's so cool. It's a recap of each Diablo game, 1 through 3,
Wow.
up until the events of Diablo 4. And they're done like fireside chats where he's like talking to you one-on-one and like giving you some lore and telling you the story. It's
Cute.
very, very cool. It's a really
Ooh.
awesome listen. It's about 45 minutes total for all of the videos.
Wow.
And it really does get you hyped about, the lore and the background, the stuff happening in the background, and sort of the motivations of a lot of these characters that you don't necessarily get by just playing the game.
I should totally. Well, it's like I want to like listen to that, but I'm also frustrated that we don't get that full stuff in the game.
Yeah. It's kind of a mixed message to spend 45 minutes hyping up the story instead of the end game.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if we're trying to
Yes.
figure out which direction
is
they're
it?
pointed
Again,
at.
it's these like two goals that they're trying to achieve that don't go well together.
Honestly, my first impression of this act was incredibly strong. And I missed all of this about Elias. I was completely sold and converted because we moved away from the ghosts and the phantoms that I've talked about that bugged
that
me.
does help.
And about halfway through this act, we moved towards religious
Low bar.
religious fanatics and demons, which is what I'm here for.
Yeah, the demon, the higher, the prime evil stuff. That was
Right.
awesome.
And I loved Elias because he was a guy who looked freaky in a dungeon trying to summon demons. And that's my shit. A couple weeks ago, when this comes out, I will have just I like remixed and remastered the episode on Wall Street, the 1987 movie about stockbrokers, which I argue for half an hour is a perfect Faustus story. And so I'm seeing demons and demon summoning everywhere anyway. And when this act took the turn to the weird bloody dog we saw in Act 2 becomes Mephisto, that is my shit.
Yeah.
That revelation sold me on this whole act, and then it became my favorite game of all time. But
yeah,
upon second glance, you have a point.
yeah, it's all these things that just there's a lot of conflicting messages from this game, a lot of conflicting feelings that we're having, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's I don't mean to say that, but I need to examine it. And it's one of those things that if you it's rewarding, sort of like Elden Ring. I don't know if you ever sat and watched an Elden Ring lore video, because you don't get any of that playing the game. Maybe I'm approaching it the wrong way. Maybe instead of it being the game itself being lacking, maybe it's an opportunity to go in as an individual and increase the investment by going and seeking this stuff out, even if it's not in the game itself. I mean, it is very interesting once you get into it, but I don't know, maybe you shouldn't have to work that hard.
No, I think that's a nice positive spin on it. Like, you're encouraged to seek it out and dig more into it if you want to, because there are plenty of players out there who do not care about the lore and are just here to build a great character and kill a lot of demons and have a lot of fun. And so they may not be oh my gosh, they may not want to be, it's late, I'm tired. They may not want to be like inundated with like, now here's a 45-minute cutscene where we dive deep into the lore. Like, they're like, yeah, like skip. I just want to play the game. So I understand that. Thank you for the tip on those videos, Tristan. I'm definitely going to watch those. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and we're only halfway.
Yeah,
we
like
have
there's
some time
so
left.
much of the game left.
And we have so many dangling characters.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to see Donan again with that weird soulstone thing. We have to see this weird eye and Lorath again. We've got Nerel back in Act 1. I'm excited to see how this coalesces.
I want more Lilith though, because I feel like that's I think something that made Act 3 tough was that we didn't get enough of her. So it was a lot of like, oh, what if we talk about Lilith but never actually like see her and engage with her? Like, we just have some other guy trying to summon her. So I hope that we get more of her in the next act. All right. Well, this has been fun.
That's Act 3.
That's Act 3. Let us
Well
know.
done.
The recap, wonderful.
Thank you. It's the best part of the episode. Let us know what y'all thought of this act. If this is YouTube, you can comment below.
Mhm.
If this is Substack, you can also comment below. If it's anything else, you can send us an email at secondbreakfastpod@gmail.com.
If you draw a pentagram and you shout our names 3 times, we will also be summoned.
We will, yes.
So
Holding mics, looking serene.
And we will kill you. That is a threat.
Welcome back.
All right. That's a good way to end it.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
All right, bye.
see ya.